Did you know that depending on where you're located, your book's spine might look different? This video will share everything you'll need to know about the spine of your children's book. Hi there, I'm Eevi, an award-winning children's author and ghostwriter over on eevijones.com and the creator of Children's Book University. I create videos specifically for children's authors, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss my weekly videos. In this video, we'll look at what a spine is, huge geographic differences between book spines, whether or not to add text to our spine, my number one ninja tip when it comes to text on the spine of our book, and we'll look at a couple great spine design guidelines to get our own creative juices going. So let's jump right in. What is a spine and why is it important? The spine is the part that connects the front and back cover of our book. It's the surface that faces us when we are placing a book onto our shelves, and it usually provides us with the book title as well as the author name. The spine is important because it is part of our cover sleeve that we will have to create for our book, and so there are a number of things we will want to pay attention to. The first thing I would like to look at is the huge geographic differences between book spines. In places like the US, the spine text faces downwards, written from top to bottom. So when our book is on a shelf, we have to tilt our head to the right in order to read the text on our spine. And if we lay our book on a table with the front cover facing up, then our spine text is upright, so we can easily read it. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because some countries actually do it differently. Germany, for example, has many of its book titles printed upward from the bottom to the top. So we would have to tilt our head to the left in order to read the spine of a book on a bookshelf. And if a book is placed on the table with the cover facing up, then the spine text would be upside down. The rest of the book has the usual orientation that we are familiar with. So this is where my first ninja tip comes in. Once we are ready to design our book cover sleeve, which includes the front cover, the back cover, and the spine, we want to keep our market in mind. So for example, if we publish a book in the United States and then decide to translate it for a different international market, we will want to make sure to see what the covers of those specific markets look like. Now, something I get asked a lot is whether or not to add text to our spine. And it's a relevant question because we won't always get to do so. When I wrote my very first children's book many years ago, I was actually quite surprised when I learned that I wouldn't be able to add text to the spine of my paperback version of my book, simply because no one told me. Whether or not we will be able to add text to our spine will depend entirely on how thick our spine is. And the thickness of our spine depends mainly on three things. 1, whether our book is a paperback or hardcover. 2, what type of paper we are selecting for our book because heavier stock is slightly thicker. And 3, how many pages our book has. There are many different online tools to figure out the width of our spine. Both KDP and Ingram Spark, which are the two print-on-demand platforms I am using for my own books, have their own cover calculators, which also show us the width of our spine. Something those calculators do not include, however, and that is really important to us children's authors and our illustrators, is the pixel size for our cover. We could always convert inches or centimeters to pixels ourselves, but if you don't know, I've actually created a tool specifically for us children's authors and illustrators that does just that. And that's my illustration template generator, to which I have provided the link in the description below. So if you want to know the actual image size in pixels for your cover or your single or double spread illustrations, make sure to use that tool instead. I wish I would have had a tool like this when I worked on my first children's book, so that's really why I created it. As I already mentioned, the number of pages in our book is one of the deciding factors when it comes to whether or not we can add text to our spine. Our page count here refers to how many interior pages our completed book has. If you need help figuring out the page count of your book or how to count your pages, many have had this question before. So I actually made a separate video on that as well, and I will add it to the description below. KDP and Ingram Spark both have their own required minimum page count in order for us to add text to our spine, which also differs depending on whether we want the paperback or hardcover version. So over on KDP, we need a minimum of 101 pages if we want to print text onto our paperback spine, and a minimum of 76 pages if we want to print text onto our hardcover spine. And over on Ingram Spark, we need a minimum of 48 pages if we want to print text onto our paperback spine, and a minimum of 48 pages if we want to add text onto our hardcover spine. Now here's my biggest ninja tip when it comes to book spines. Don't despair if you should find that your book does not meet any of these minimum page requirements. If you're like me, your book probably won't reach the minimum 48 page over on Ingram Spark, let alone the 76 or 101 required pages over on KDP, unless of course you write chapter books or longer graphic novels. While we currently won't be able to print text onto our spine over on KDP, we may just be able to do so over on Ingram Spark. If you make sure your text stays within the marked safe area, you may get away with a page count below the officially required 48 pages in order to add text to the spine on Ingram Spark's hardcovers. Using my cover templates that I mentioned earlier, I've been able to print a spine text onto hardcover books with as little as 38 pages over on Ingram Spark. That being said, I have not tried this with the paperback version on Ingram Spark, so if you have, let us know in the comments below. Now, seeing these numbers, you may be asking whether or not I would recommend one platform over the other. So if you haven't watched my videos on just that, make sure to watch those as well, where I share which platform I use when, because that decision depends on a number of things, such as where I want to distribute my books and also our royalties. So I've shared the 2 separate videos on that below in the description. So as of right now, I forego adding text on my spine on any of my paperbacks, unless it's one of my chapter books under one of my other author names, because those usually meet the required minimum page count. And I do add text to the spine on all my hardcovers, as you can see right here. Now that we know how to figure out the width of our spine and whether or not we can add text to our spine, let's look at a couple of great spine design guidelines and ideas to get our own creative juices flowing. Please keep in mind that, like with so many other things I'm sharing with you, there is no one way of doing things. There are many different beautifully creative ways, and I'm sharing just a few of the most common ones. Guideline number 1 is to keep your spine design simple. Unless we have written a middle grade chapter book or a longer graphic novel that provides us with a thicker spine, we will want to keep our spine relatively simple. And that's mainly because the height of our letters will have to stay pretty low, or the font altogether will have to stay fairly small. And so making a narrow spine like this too busy might end up making it harder for our text to be read. So here we will want to make sure we are using an easy to read font and to use a color that helps it stand out from the background. Guideline number 2 is to stick to the main elements. The most common elements that are being displayed on a spine are the author name and our book title. So if we decide to add text to our spine, these are the 2 main things we would want to put on it. Here the author name is usually up top and the title of the book toward the center of our spine, with the title slightly bigger than the author name. If you wish to add the name of your illustrator as well, then most people usually only add the last name of the author and the illustrator, mainly to ensure everything fits onto the spine and doesn't look too cluttered. And the names are usually separated with a /. There are also a number of additional elements we can add here, one of them being the logo of our imprint, for example. Now, if you want to know a bit more about imprints and whether creating an imprint would be something for you and your book, make sure you watch my separate video on that. I've added the link to it in the description below. The logo is usually added to the other end of the spine. We can have it facing the same way our title is facing, or we can have it placed in such a way that it is easily recognizable or readable when our book is standing on a shelf. Here I would only recommend adding our imprint logo if it isn't too detailed, because remember that it will have to be very small to fit onto our spine. If you decide to include your imprint, but the logo itself is too detailed, you can also simply add the name of your imprint. Something that is usually not added to our spine is the series title if our book is part of a series. Exceptions here are series like The Magic Tree House, The Little Blue Truck, or series like The Dog Man or The Wimpy Kid, because here the series name is the brand for these authors, which isn't usually the case for most authors. Another great ninja tip I wanted to share here is really helpful if our spine is extra narrow, and that's to display our book title in such a way that the letters are placed below each other instead of next to each other. A great example here is the book The Magical Yet by Angela Di Terlizzi. Displaying our title vertically like this allows us to make our individual letters bigger. The only drawback is that this would only work with a relatively short title. Guideline number 3 is to make sure our spine's background works well with our lettering. When it comes to our spine background, we have multiple different options. Our sleeve can be presented in many different ways. One option is to have one single illustration spread across the entire front, spine, and back. The second option is a unicolored front, back, and spine. And we can also have a single illustration or color that is spreading across the entire front and back, but where the spine is covered with some sort of different colored band or background. Either one of these options works for our spine, whether we are adding text to our spine or not. I have used every single one of these different methods or options for my own books more than once. If we are using an illustration spread as our background, we just have to make sure that it doesn't get too busy behind our lettering. Otherwise, it'll be hard to read. That's why we could simply add a different colored band to help with the readability of our spine. Here the band could be the exact width of our spine so we wouldn't see it on the front cover, like I have done here with my book How to Self-Publish a Children's Book. Or we can make our color block slightly extend onto the front and back cover, the way I used it for my book Precious, a keepsake for new moms and moms-to-be. Now, if you need any more help with the cover altogether and the design and some design ideas, make sure you watch my separate video on that. I will link to it in the description below. Guideline number 4 is to try to make our spine look uniform. What do I mean by that? I previously mentioned that the title of a series is usually not added to the spine unless it is an actual brand like The Little Blue Truck or The Magic Tree House. However, adding the series title isn't the only way we can convey that a book is part of a series. Here are 2 great examples. Even without a provided series title, we can clearly see that those books belong to a series. They use the same style and placement, the same font, and a cohesive color palette. And finally, guideline number 5 is to simply look at the spines of similar books. This is especially helpful if we are still a bit uncertain as to what we want our spine to look like, because even if our spine is not wide enough to add text to it, we still want to make sure it looks great, right? And so letting ourselves be inspired by similar already published books always helps. Book spines are often neglected even though they are really important. After all, that's the first part we see of any book on a shelf, right? So I really hope you found this video helpful and that it got you excited to think about your own spine. And don't forget, if you have already published your book, we can change, tweak, and update our cover sheet of our book anytime. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't yet. It really encourages me to keep making free videos for you just like this one. Here's to your very own beautiful spine with or without text. Bye!